Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron here. We're going to go over a couple things from Icons of Evolution by Jonathan Wells. And the first thing is the homology of limbs. And what homology is the likeness or similarities of limbs, which would tend to be shown as a proof of evolution. But there's a couple things I want to show us first. Let me show you the book I'm using in case you're new here. We don't do videos per se, we have a channel. So this is something that's been going on for years. And so everything's building on everything else. So it's not like maybe an individual video, but you can use it as an individual video, obviously. So Jonathan Wells, he's got a PhD from UC Berkeley, and he's also got a PhD from Yale. So 2 PhDs from 2 very prominent universities. So he's not to be taken lightly. And so like you've got Dean Kenyon, Michael Behe, Paul Johnson, who teaches at UC Berkeley as well, Behe at Lehigh University, Kenyon is from the University of San Francisco, saying stuff. And let me just share this with you too. I'm going to read this. Stephen Jay Gould was known as, in the latter half of the 20th century, the leading proponent of evolution, and taught at Harvard University. And so he says this: the iconography of persuasion strikes even closer than words to the core of our being. Every demagogue, every humorist, every advertising executive has known and exploited the evocative power of well-chosen picture. But many of our pictures are incarnations of concepts masquerading as neutral descriptions of nature. These are the most potent sources of conformity, since ideas passing as descriptions lead us to equate the tentative with the unambiguously factual. Now that was a 1989 Norton Wonderful Life, page 28. The fascinating thing to me about that is he seemed to precurse memes, the power of memes, to succinctly and very powerfully in a few moments present something. So, and he was also very big on that maybe there were some mythologies that are masquerading as fact in evolutionary thinking that really are not. So the homology of vertebrate limbs. In the 1840s, British anatomist Richard Owen called the first kind of similarity analogy, and the second kind homology. At the time, distinction served principally as an aid in biological classification. The classic examples of homologous structures are the forelimbs of vertebrates, animals with backbones. Although a bat has wings for flying, a porpoise has flippers for swimming, a horse has legs for running, and a human has hands for grasping, the bone patterns in their forelimbs are similar. And let me just show you the good illustration that he's got here. So let me cut to the chase. I've done some other videos on this as well over the years, and maybe a pamphlet from the UK creation science movement in the United Kingdom, is do similarities between the hands, legs, rib cage of, let's say, man and primates, does this indicate a common ancestry, or does this indicate a common designer? And would this just be the best way of doing things? And so he goes into homology and circular reasoning. Again, Wells, 2 PhDs. I think he may be at the Discovery Institute now. Just fantastic reasoning. And so in this particular chapter, he comes to really a devastating conclusion that it can be shown that homology really has nothing to do with common ancestry, because there is enough differences, such as in hips and walking upright versus not walking upright. I'll show you this illustration as well. And in every sphere of existence. And then there's enough things like duck-billed platypuses and multiple perfected creatures kind of things. And with the geological record, the paleontological record, showing no homology and showing no transitional life forms in any real sense, in any sense that Darwin especially was looking for, that the fossil record should be full of them, that homology has to do with the Creator showed us that this would just be the best way to do things, but not common descent. It was common design, not common descent. And this is Barra's blunder, which he goes into. This has been a fascinating read for me, by the way. I need to use this as a textbook sometime at Indiana Bible College for Science in the Bible. I think it would be an extremely good textbook. So evidence from developmental pathways, evidence from developmental genetics, similar gene in non-homologous limbs. You know, the butterfly is always a tough deal for evolutionists. Those, the eyeball. How do butterflies go from caterpillar to chrysalis to goo to then beautiful butterfly? Well, where does evolution fit into all this? But there's several things. You know, there's so many thousands of different, to me, incontrovertible mysteries and really impossibilities. I don't think evolution could be true. So homology. So we'll come to this. Let me just read this exchange. Teacher. Okay, let's start today's lesson with a quick review. Yesterday I talked about homology, homologous features such as vertebrate limbs shown in your textbook provide us with some of our best evidence that living things have evolved from common ancestors. Student, raising hand, says, I know you went over this yesterday, but I'm still confused. How do we know whether features are homologous? Teacher says, well, if you look at vertebrate limbs, you can see that even though they're adapted to perform different functions, their bone patterns are structurally similar. The student, but you told us yesterday that even though an octopus eye is structurally similar to a human eye, the two are not homologous. Teacher, that's correct. Octopus eyes and human eyes are not homologous because their common ancestor did not have such an eye. So the student responds, so regardless of similarity, features are not homologous unless they're inherited from a common ancestor, right? Teacher, yes, now you're catching on. Student, looking puzzled. Well, actually, I'm still confused. You say homologous features provide some of our best evidence for common ancestry. But before we can tell whether features are homologous, we have to know whether they came from a common ancestor. That's right, says the teacher. Student, scratching head. I must be missing something. It sounds as though you're saying that we know features are derived from a common ancestor because they're derived from a common ancestor. Isn't that circular reasoning? So at this point, the overburdened teacher might simply end the discussion and move on to something else, but science education would be better served if he or she acknowledged the problem and took some time to analyze it in class. Instead of being told to memorize a circular argument, students might be encouraged to think about the difference between theory and evidence and how to compare the two. I tell you what, I was going to go into Ernest Haeckel's embryos, but I want to stop right there today. So God bless. I'll talk with you later in Jesus' name.